Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We'll be waiting for Dr. Sari to join us, and we can start from there. I just would like to announce something that toward the end of the lecture, please don't leave the lecture as there will be a quiz following at the end. So Dr. Sari has joined us. Welcome, Doctor.
Assalamu alaikum. Ismauni, do you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, Doctor, your voice is clear.
All right. We need to share the meeting. Am I a host?
You are now, Dr. Host.
All right, great. That's fine. All right. Please. Can you see what I'm the presentation? Healthcare systems?
Yes, Doctor, it's healthcare systems. It's clear.
All right, fantastic. We're gonna wait for a few minutes. Let's start.
If this is okay, Doctor, with you, let's just wait for 2 minutes maximum, then we can start. The students are joining.
Thank you. Would you close the door, please?
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Omar, should we start?
Doctor, we have 95 students out of 156. Would you like to start?
I'm going to start.
Okay, sure.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. I hope everybody's doing well. Have any of you had a chance to go to the summit, the AI Global Summit? Or have you heard of the AI Global Summit? Anyone? Heard of it, been to it, wants to go to it? I think خلاص خلصت اليوم الساعة 2. Yes, no? No, nobody's been. طيب. So out of interest, I attended the first day of the summit, which was Tuesday, and I mainly attended, there was a few sessions talking about artificial intelligence in healthcare. This is a topic that I've been interested in, even though I haven't pursued my interest yet. Mobile AI and its applications in different venues, different sectors, including the healthcare sector. And there's a very interesting speaker. Well, there's a panel of around 5 or 6 figures that represented different countries. And one of them is kind of a information officer who works out of the NHS in England, in Britain, and basically he's responsible for administering or receiving AI technology into healthcare. And he said something very interesting. He said we're in a time where the progress in healthcare is going to be exponentially very rapid compared to the last 3,000 years. Tamam. If we go thousands of years ago, changes took hundreds of years to develop a new procedure or a way of anesthesia or medicine. And then we come to the early 20th, the Renaissance, or the Islamic era, where there's been a lot of advancements. And then you enter the 20th century, the first part of it. And then now in the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, things are rapidly exponential. And he says now we have 3 things in place that will help that progress take place very quickly. And one of them is the omics. So you talk about things like genomics, pharmacomics, but mainly things like the genome and genomic medicine, which is a huge area of advancement for both diagnosis, for therapy, for treatment, for prognosis. The second is artificial intelligence, via robotic surgery, via data processing, via all the things that the AI brings to the mix. And what do you think the third is? You can take a wild guess.
Cost efficiency, maybe, or like decrease hospital stays.
So no, okay. Take 15 steps back from a much bigger picture, from a much bigger perspective. We're not talking about something specific within. We're going to talk about cost efficiency today, actually, but no, we're talking about medicine and its progress, and its rapid progress is based on 3 pillars. One of them is artificial intelligence. The other one is the advancement in the omics, like genomics, and the third,
evidence-based medicine.
Today, no, but good point. Evidence-based medicine was discussed. And they're talking about how AI might one day replace evidence-based medicine, but that's yet to be seen in the future. Who else can guess? It was in the talk that you listened to by Atul Gawande last week.
Checklists?
No, who keeps on guessing? Mashallah alayk.
Ana Osama.
Osama, طيب. Good job, Osama. طيب, it was in the talk And it's also right in front of you. Osama, take one last shot. It's right in front of you. On the
Doctor,
screen.
I'm sorry, I'm driving and I can't see the presentation.
Type anyone, healthcare systems. So systems, the fact that we now in healthcare work out of systems, along with the technology of AI, along with the technology of genomics, is going to allow us to have this exponential rapid growth and development in healthcare. We're jumping by day, we're now jumping by weeks, as opposed to we used to be jumping by years, and prior to that, jumping by decades and by millennia. Tamam? We're now, the changes are happening day by day. Healthcare systems is one of those three pillars: AI and advanced knowledge in areas like genomics. Tamam? And that's what we're going to talk about today: healthcare systems. Now, this lecture is very outdated. I consider this lecture very outdated, but I continue to like to give this lecture because I feel that it gives a real life feel or life touch as to what was a few years ago and what is happening right now. And whatever is happening right now has not yet completely crystallized, but it is happening as we speak with regards to the Saudi healthcare system. But what was a few years ago was very clear, and the changes that needed to happen back then were also very clear. And today we're in a place to reflect, are we making the right changes? So what I'll say as I come to the end of this lecture is this lecture, most of its content was written a good 6 or 7 years ago. And then when we look at what's going on today, we're going to look at what are the areas that were suggested back then and what actually is changing in the healthcare system today. Tamam? What is a system? What is a healthcare system? Anyone? Should I pick and choose? Well, you have some volunteers. What is a healthcare system? Sultan, what is a healthcare system? Sultan bin Mahfoud.
Yes, doctor.
What is a healthcare system? Jihan.
It's like institutions and sources that deliver the health services to people.
Sultan, you want to try to take a shot at it? Sultan? Are you with us or you're not with us? Dr. Omar? Okay, Lean. Lean? I can't hear you. I can't hear anyone. I don't know if you're on or you're off.
We can
Doctor,
hear you.
I'm still thinking about the answer. I think, although it's so simple, it's so difficult to define, I think. And what is a healthcare system?
So what is a system? ايش يعني نظام system?
Maybe it's a series of I'm not sure.
طيب.
Doctor,
try
I
to-
tried to answer,
Yes.
but I don't know if you heard me or not.
Jihan, I heard you. But I wanted Lean to take a shot at it and Sultan. Sultan شكله حط نفسه على الميوت وتخبى. ما في مشكلة. لين رفعت يدك. Okay, I'm gonna pick on people.
Can I try, doctor?
Yes, of course, please do.
Like, a system is like different components that come together and work together to make the whole.
To what purpose? They come together for what?
I mean, just make everything run smoother. That's why you have systems. To organize things, I guess, like someone said in the comments. So a system has a certain hierarchy. Not sure.
Hierarchy. No.
Yeah,
So
hierarchy.
excellent, Johara. Excellent. It's the system is different components coming together from people, from institutions, from resources to deliver a service or a product. In our case, when we talk about healthcare, a system is the organization of people and institutions and different resources that deliver healthcare to meet the needs of people who need it, to meet the needs of the target population. So now that's exactly what the system is, and that's almost exactly what you said. Excellent. So Johara, you came very close to the right definition, and it's important to understand the system because by understanding that it's different components coming together to meet a specific purpose, we can understand how to organize things, how to improve delivery to get that outcome that we're looking for. And I said that this lecture is a little bit outdated, and I attest to that. بس حنعطيكم شوية global comparison. Back then, when I started researching this, I looked at different organizations like the WHO, Bloomberg, or the Commonwealth Fund that compare healthcare systems globally, different countries. We're looking الآن, when we talk about healthcare system, we could be talking about the healthcare system of Saudi Arabia, which for most of this lecture we are, and we could be talking about the healthcare system of Riyadh as a region or as a city. When we talk about global comparisons, we're talking about healthcare systems as countries. In every country, their own healthcare system. For WHO, back in 2000, or 20 years ago, they put down criteria. We're going to talk about some of these criteria today. They gave criteria regarding health 50% of the weight of the comparison. And then they gave 25% regarding access to care and 25% regarding the cost of care. One of you guys was talking about cost efficiency. So yes, cost is very important in comparing, because if you pay more, then obviously that takes away from the efficiency of your system. And in that comparison back then, 20 years ago, France ranked #1 as per the WHO, based on these three characteristics: health, or responsiveness or access, and the financial contribution. Italy came in #2, Canada came in #30, and the USA came in #38. Where do you think Saudi Arabia came in? حنتكلم في النهاية. The Bloomberg, similarly, they ranked based on similar criteria. Life expectancy as an indicator of health, the weight was 60%. And then regarding cost, again, in this case, they characterized something called the per capita cost to gross domestic product, which is a financial indicator. They gave it 30% of the weight of the comparison, and another 10% looking at the total expenditure. So Bloomberg gave 40% to the money, 40% to the cost, and 60% to health indicators, mainly life expectancy. And they ranked these countries, and Singapore came in #1, Hong Kong came in #2. Again, Canada came in a little bit better here at 21, and the USA worse at 44. And where does Saudi Arabia rank? We'll see towards the end. The third comparison is for the Commonwealth countries, right? And if you look at the left side column, you'll find that they have the characteristics of the criteria, right? And what did they use? They, on the top, the overall ranking, and then they used quality of care, and they gave that some points, which talks about effectiveness and safety and being patient-centered, access to care, and then the efficiency of care, the equity, and healthy lives in general. And then the last row has health expenditure. And then you have a number telling you per capita for every person what it costs for the country to deliver healthcare for individuals. And what comes on the top of this ranking? Who comes on the top of this ranking? The UK, yes, is number 1 in the overall ranking. After that, there's Switzerland. And then after that, there's Sweden. Who comes at the bottom of the ranking?
The US.
The US.
The US. Excellent. So this is 2013 data. The US ranked at the bottom of these 11 countries. Now jump to the last row where we talked about health expenditure. Who spend the highest on healthcare?
The US as well.
So they spend the highest per capita and they rank the lowest. And who spend the lowest on healthcare? You could say the UK almost spent the lowest amount on healthcare. They came in number 2, spending 3,400, right? So the people that spend the least on healthcare ranked in terms of their system as the best, and the people that spend the most, almost double or 2.5 times, ranked the least. Tamam? So one of you talked about cost efficiency, and yes, cost efficiency is a very big factor in measuring the effectiveness of a system and the efficiency of a system, and therefore the ranking of a system. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. But the important point that we're trying to land here is that paying more money doesn't necessarily mean better health. Actually, systems that are able to pay less generally are so efficient and so effective that they also have better indicators of health. So in an institute called the IHI, they came up, there's a paper, and I forget the writer of the paper, he came up with a paper called The Triple Aim of Healthcare, right? And he delineates these 3 criteria, which are very similar to the criteria that were used in the comparison. Care, health, and cost. So what does care mean? Care basically talks about the quality and the experience of care. So the quality of care in terms of its safety, in terms of its effectiveness, but also in terms of the experience of care. And these are 2 topics that we will be covering. We'll have a whole lecture that addresses quality and another lecture that addresses patient experience. So that is what care talks about as one of the triple aims. The second is health. And in health, we are specifically talking about health access to care. Access to care, meaning that everybody has access, that health is universal in a country or has universality. What does that mean, universality or equity? Anyone?
Free healthcare?
Equity of care, universality. No, equity or universality in healthcare. What does that mean?
Means that everyone has access to those services.
Is everybody has access, and when we talk about equity, to equal healthcare. You don't get people getting, top-notch healthcare and other people getting bad healthcare or no healthcare. Universality means everybody's covered and everybody has access to the same quality healthcare. Tamam? And that is what we talk about when we say health.
Okay, doctor,
the third
is it okay if I ask?
Of course, please.
I have a question, doctor. So does that mean, when you say access to healthcare, does that mean in regards of cost, like free healthcare, or does that mean if the patient is able to receive medical support or medical access?
Can we wait to answer that, if you don't mind, because we will answer it. It's coming up in 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to come to that. So that is regarding the universality or the equity issue, and then finally the cost issue. And as we said, that cost is equivalent to efficiency in delivering healthcare at low cost, and that means that there's always an attempt for healthcare systems to improve themselves, is to reduce how much they spend per capita, how much they spend for every person that they're covering, for every patient of the population, for every person in the population.
Doctor?
Yes, dear.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Do you mean by the cost and the efficiency? Do you mean that is the relationship that they waste time less, so they have more efficient system, or they have more efficient system, so they pay money less?
So efficiency means a lot of things, and effectiveness means a lot of things. But when we talk about efficiency in this, we talk about both time and money. And by time, when we talk about, for example, wasting the patient's time, that goes under here, under care, right? Because it's about the patient experience. But when we talk about cost, and time is a cost, and we talk about efficiency, then we talk about wasted money and wasted time to run or improve processes. So when you talk about an efficient process, something that takes 100 days to be completed and ought to be completed in 20 days, you're wasting so much time, 80 days, and with that time, you're wasting so much money because you're paying salaries, you're paying depreciation, tamam? So efficiency is the opposite of wastage. It's to do things with the least amount of wastage possible. It's to do things right. Effectiveness is to do the right thing. Efficiency is to do things right. Both, and time is money. So is that clear?
Yes.
All right. So to pursue the triple aim, you need to specify the population of concern. Let's say we specify the population of the country of Saudi Arabia. We might say, well, if we're building a system that deals with the population of the south, then our population will be the population of the south of Saudi Arabia. If we say we have a problem with diabetic patients, then our population would be diabetic patients. We have to specify what population we are addressing, what market we are pursuing. We have to look at things within the policies of the country that may have constraints and challenges, or make easier, make better the running of the healthcare system. Either policy that makes things more difficult or makes things easier. And then there needs to be an integrator. An integrator means somebody that puts it all together, somebody who is responsible for putting it all together. So you have in Saudi Arabia, you have a population, and then, you know, for that population, you think about delivering quality care, reaching every single resident every single native and resident in the country at a very low cost and a very efficient way. And then you have to understand that these policy constraints may harm you, and they sometimes may help you. The policy comes from the higher ups, right? So budget, for example, budgetary constraints are constraints when you talk about when you by a royal decree, for example, outlaw something or make something illegal, or you force something. All these are things that the integrator has to take into account as they're managing the health of the population. Who is the integrator for the healthcare system in Saudi Arabia? Who is
Is it the Minister of Health?
It is the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health has to look at the full map of Saudi Arabia. They have to look at all the policies that apply. They have to look at the health of the citizens and the quality of care and the access of care and the budget. So they are the integrator for health in Saudi Arabia. And as I said, the population you specify, and you can specify it by geography. You can specify it by disease. It depends on what problem we're trying to solve or what system we're trying to create, right? So for the person who asked about universality, this is what universality is. Universality means that you have guaranteed. Let me restate that. So there was a time not long ago that access to free healthcare was guaranteed for every national in Saudi Arabia. It was a citizen's right. And even the expats who lived in Saudi Arabia had universality through the Ministry of Health, through certain hospitals, so they were guaranteed to receive free healthcare. Now, this posed a problem because healthcare is very costly, and it's becoming more costly. And we're dealing with more complex diseases, and we're dealing with more complex therapies, and they're more expensive. So at some point, the country had to kind of wake up and say, okay, we need to change the model of delivery. We want all our citizens and we want all our expats to have access to healthcare, but we don't want to, the government doesn't want to pay for everything. We want the insurance companies to shoulder the costs. We will subsidize, we will pay for part of the healthcare expenditure, but we want to bring in the insurance companies to shoulder off some of the costs. Tamam? And then from 2001 or 2003, moving up to today, we moved year by year into mandating that insurance companies, first there was insurance provided for employers, for their employees, that was mandated. And first it was for non-Saudis or for residents or expats. Now it's even for Saudis. Now we are moving towards almost all the citizens and residents in both the private and the public sector are becoming insured. Now almost everyone is insured. Not everyone, but almost everyone is insured. And what does that mean? Does that mean that universality is gone? Yes, no? Does insuring everyone mean
No.
that universality
No.
is gone? No, it doesn't mean universality is gone. It means we are maintaining universality. Somebody's paying, somebody's picking up the check. It doesn't have to be the government, but it's not the person. No person will find themselves in Saudi Arabia, no person will find themselves one day facing a large sum of money that they have to pay because they have a condition that needs to be treated in hospitals. No person in Saudi Arabia, right? And that is universality. Whereas that cannot be said of 1/7 of the American population, where you had around 40 or 50 million uninsured people, which meant that if they got into accidents or they unfortunately developed a disease like cancer and they couldn't afford treatment, that they basically wouldn't be covered by the healthcare system. 1/7 of the American population. A big debate. Healthcare in the US was a big debate for all incoming American presidents, for all debates regarding the presidential election. 1/7 of their population uninsured, which is a huge burden on the system overall. So that's universality. It means that everybody has access to care. The country pays for it, insurance company pay for it. It's a mixture of both, whatever it is, but everybody has access. That's universality. Ali Sa'alni Su'al, is that clear now?
Yeah.
حق universality.
Yeah, but doctor, like for the insurance, even if the insurance company like covers the cost, didn't you yourself as an individual also have to pay for your insurance? For most people.
Do you have to pay for your insurance?
Yeah.
Well, اليوم insurance mainly. Hello? Am I still there?
Yes.
Are you still there?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
doctor,
doctor,
yeah.
your voice is clear.
Okay. اليوم insurance mainly is purchased by the employer. So whether you work in the public sector or the private sector, insurance is mainly health insurance is bought by your employer. Tamam? And that's the mandate. So as a Saudi individual, no, you don't have to buy insurance, and you're covered depending on what hospitals, what sector you work in. Many people automatically get treated in hospitals that belong to the sector, like the military or the National Guard, or even King Faisal, based on the nature of disease, Wazat al-Ta'lim, based on the access. So a lot of people have, for Saudis, for the non-Saudis, mainly expats, they're almost all employed, and hence they must have insurance bought for them by their employers. Is clear?
Okay. Yes, thank you so much.
And this is what the map looks like. So the Ministry of Health, and this is shrinking now. This is changing somewhat, but the Ministry of Health continues to run and operate 60% of healthcare in green. And then you have the private sector in blue, which is which is where the focus is. Even the Ministry of Health is trying to grow private sector. In fact, the Ministry of Health itself is trying to become private sector, and that's what privatization means. And then you have other hospitals accounting for another 20%, like the armed forces, the National Guard, King Faisal, royal commissions. But the map almost still looks like that, where the Ministry of Health continues to run and operate the majority of healthcare institutes, hospitals, and centers, but the private sector is growing, and that's where the focus is going. So we talked about the Ministry of Health as an integrator. So its first role, in actuality, not in theory, its first role was to actually run that green area on the map, to manage those hospitals. So they are not just integrating, but they're also delivering healthcare. And then they're also responsible for things like public health. They're responsible for planning and regulating. They're responsible for reporting, right? There's so many responsibilities for the Ministry of Health. So the question becomes, was the Ministry of Health in the right place as an integrator, or in the wrong place as an integrator? And is there something that can be changed in the role of the ministry or not? What do you think? Should the ministry be managing all the hospitals in the country? Well, should the ministry let go of management and focus more on regulating and planning and reporting and the issues of public health with taw'iyah, informing the public, screening services? What should the ministry focus on? Delivering healthcare, or regulating and oversight for healthcare? Yes, no, maybe someone?
Hi, doctor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so right now the direction that the Ministry of Health is going to is oversight and regulating, but who is to say if the old
that good or
way
bad?
was
Good or
wrong
bad?
or right? I see it as it can be good, it can be bad. If we go all the way to privatization like the US, where the Ministry of Health is regulating, but doesn't have a big reach into the private sector. I mean, like in the US, the companies basically control the healthcare system. I don't see that as a good thing, to be honest.
So
we can
don't have
adopt.
to compare to the US.
Mm.
We don't have to compare to the US. But in principle, when you talk about the health integrator, does that mean that's the entity that delivers healthcare, or that oversights or provides oversight for healthcare?
It should be, I think it should be both.
Okay. Well, actually, one of the things, so thank you for attempting to answer. One of the things that flooded the Ministry of Health in terms of its responsibilities was the fact that it was both. Because في بعض المسؤوليات, some of the responsibilities are contradicting, or in other words, they form a conflict of interest. And as a regulator, as an auditor, you are in a position where you kind of look at whoever's delivering healthcare and you say whether they're doing it right or wrong. And if you're delivering healthcare, then you kind of that body, that regulator, will kind of say you're doing it right or wrong. If you're doing both, there's little chance for improvement. There needs to be separation between audits, or people who are providing oversight, who are regulating, who are planning, who are looking at the bigger picture, and people who are delivering. So that the accountability, there has to be accountability on the delivery side. So the Ministry of Health says this is the outcome that we're looking for, and it empowers these hospitals with their management and with their strategy and with their plan. And then they look at the results, they look at the outcome, and if they're performing good outcomes, then good, and if they're performing bad outcomes, then things need to be changed. That is the role of the integrator. The oversight is the role of the integrator. Tamam? So that just gives you an idea how countries ideally tackle the concept of a healthcare system. Now, when we look at Saudi Arabia, like every country in the world, but more so because it's a growing nation, we have a lot of challenges that have poured into the healthcare system specifically. So, for example, the aging population, people are getting older. People are getting older. They're reaching older ages. اليوم you have people in their 80s and their 90s. They cost the healthcare system a lot more than people in their 20s and their 30s. So that's a burden. Cost of care بشكل عام, in general, cost of care is increasing. That's a financial burden. The creation of medical errors, because healthcare is becoming more complex, and the picking up of medical errors and the treatment of medical errors is an extra burden. For our population specifically, we have an aging population. We also have a population that until recently lived a very sedentary lifestyle. A population that had a large percentage of diseases in the cardiovascular area or the endocrine area, including obesity and diabetes. To begin with, Aslan, the number of the population or the size of population is increasing. A few years ago, we were talking about 20 million. Today, we're talking about 30 million. And this is we're talking about in a passage of around 20 years, or 20 something years. There's a good 20 to 30% increase in the population. And also, people they're better informed. They have better expectations. They're better read. All that adds to the challenges that the integrator has to go over. So that's just to show you some of the statistics regarding annual growth in the population, and particularly the geriatric population on the right, the elderly, some of the diseases, non-communicable diseases, like diabetes, where Saudi Arabia ranks pretty high, but also heart disease and its growth. And then lifestyle, road traffic accidents, a major contributor to major challenge. It leaves you almost on an annual level with 33,000 patients with injuries and permanent disabilities. Imagine how much that costs the healthcare system. You have to find them beds, and you have to enroll them in rehab, and there's little chance for improvement, and they just add to the burden of the healthcare system. Same happens with obesity, and same happens with smoking. Saudi Arabia continues to be a large tobacco consumer worldwide. كل هذه أشياء, they add to the burden of the system. So that's on the challenge side. And then on the availability of resources side, we are one of the countries in the region and globally that has the lowest number of physicians per population. Look at Saudi Arabia compared to the UAE or Qatar and the US. So you're talking about 9 physicians. These statistics are a bit old, but they continue to be very close to what it was back. We're talking about almost 8 or 10 years ago. So you have around 10 physicians for 10,000 populations, where in the US you have around, in Qatar you have around 27. More than 2.5. Same applies for nurses. 21 nurses for every 10,000 of the population. In developed countries, we're looking at 100 for 10,000. So we have a big deficit in manpower. So the Ministry of Health, a few ministers ago, we're not talking about the current minister, we're talking about the previous minister. What's the name of the minister? Fakroni? I forgot.
The previous one?
الربيعة. بس مش توفيق. الربيعة حق الحرس, the twin separation guru الربيعة. Back then, the Ministry of Health had this strategy where they wanted to improve quality, they wanted to improve access, and they wanted to decrease cost of care, which is exactly based on what concept?
AAA.
The triple aim. So their strategy was basically a triple aim strategy. They wanted to increase the 3 arms of healthcare in the Ministry of Health, and they started by adding programs that pertain to quality of care, particularly looking at ICU services, accreditation, mobile clinics, practice guidelines across the country. They looked at programs pertaining to decreasing cost, right? Like bringing down obesity, which is very costly, home health care, screening programs for cancer. And they looked at a plan to improve accessibility, and they went into this idea where you have in the periphery you have a small clinic or primary health center, and that primary health center is attached in its referral to one step above. It's a general or secondary care hospital, and then that secondary care hospital is attached to one step above a specialized hospital, And then that specialized hospital is attached to the medical city of the region. There's 5 regions, north, south, east, and west, and center, and 5 medical cities that these specialized hospitals become attached to. And they made sure that they were comprehensive, meaning they looked at primary care, preventive care, rehab, dental, mental, right? Everything was covered in that system, and that there was a way to actually transfer patients from one place to the next. So even patients in the periphery ultimately arrived at the medical cities if need be, which were centered in the big centers. Tamam. There was an issue of expansion back in 2013. The number of hospitals had to increase by at least 50%. The number of beds had to double. The number of outpatient centers had to increase at least by 50%, right? And then these medical cities, I worked in the King Fahd Medical City for some time. Now there's a medical city in every region, right? And they're receiving the tertiary care for that region, and they're the flagships for the Ministry of Health in that region. Tamam. So that was the previous plan, and then that plan evolved. I'm just going to talk out here. That plan evolved to where we are today, and where do you guys think we are today? So some of that plan still is in place instead of increasing the resource, making available resources, making available the hospitals and the buildings and the manpower, right? And having these medical cities and having that comprehensive system, but also what has been added to that plan? What has been added to that plan? Anyone? Sometimes then I feel I'm lecturing in the air. ما في تجاوب. Decreasing the cost. Yeah, how? What has changed? What is اليوم ايش صار في وزارة الصحة? What is going on with the Ministry of Health today? What do you hear about something called clusters?
Yes.
They're
trying to privatize healthcare. So every cluster would be its own company, the way I understand
before
it.
we come to privatization is a couple of miles away. Before we even come to privatization, we started step 1 is to cluster healthcare. What does it mean to cluster healthcare?
To group it together, group certain things together.
Yeah, they're grouping things together. So, for example, you have the King Fahd Medical City with 2 other hospitals, with the 30 other primary care centers. That is cluster 2. You have the King Saud Medical City, previously known as Shumaisi or Markazi, clustered with, again, 2 secondary hospitals and a few healthcare centers, and that's cluster 1. You have, I think, cluster 3 in the Eastern Province, and cluster 4 in Al Qasim, and every cluster. So it's a way to have these, to separate these systems. So you're separating the healthcare from the Ministry of Health, and you're giving every cluster its autonomy to make its own decisions for a specific population that is in a geographical area that cluster covers. So it's kind of these mini, not micro, these mini systems within the big system of healthcare in Saudi Arabia, these clusters. And that is one step. Why do they have to do that? Because as said by you guys, it's true, they want to move to privatization. And instead of privatizing the whole health system or healthcare system of the country, it is easier to privatize it cluster by cluster because it's a smaller size, it's more controllable. So what they started by doing is they said, okay, these 3 hospitals and those healthcare centers, they all belong to one cluster. We're going to centralize management. We're going to centralize HR. We're going to centralize procurement. We're going to centralize IT for that cluster, right? And that's going to be one management for all. But then the different parts of the cluster, the different hospitals will follow that central management in delivering the scope of service that they were assigned. So the secondary hospitals will perform the the appendectomies and the lap cholecystectomies, whereas the tertiary centers will perform neurosurgery and cardiac surgery. Do you get the idea? But management is centralized to all, and it's placed in one place, usually in the medical city itself.
Doctor,
So that's
I have
where
to.
we're heading today with healthcare. That's where we're heading today. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have two questions. First, does that mean that the load did they started this privatization to decrease the load on the Ministry of Health? This is a question one. Question two is autonomy always a good thing?
Okay, excellent. Two very good questions. When we talk about the load, إحنا اليوم, we talked about the challenges. We talked about the challenges that the healthcare system is facing. Tamam? And the challenges, you can use a different word for challenges, which is load. And the third word is cost. Challenges, load, cost, all these are going up or becoming more difficult. And the cost is being paid for by the country itself, from the country's budget. اليوم طبعا we are in an era of taxation, and Saudi Arabia is an era of rapid growth. And even though there were times where money was at abundance, تمام, في زمن الطفرة وزمن ما بعد الطفرة, there's a time where money was at abundance. But اليوم, as a country, looking at where we want to arrive economically, stand as an economic power globally, the people responsible for running this country have to have that conversation, and they have to look at these loads or these challenges or that extra cost, and they have to say, well, how do we reduce the cost? How do we not burden the country with this cost? Well, we shift it to either the self-payers, so people who would like to pay for their own healthcare, and that's a minority, or we shift it to insurance companies, which means that employers, as part of their income, as part of their revenue, will have to be charged to buy for their employees, to buy insurance so that these employees are covered, and the government doesn't have to subsidize their health. It doesn't have to pay for their health. And maybe as a country, we might still subsidize part of healthcare. We might still have a few hospitals that the country is going to be responsible, or a few people or a few people that the country will pay for. Lakin, in general, it's about moving the cost, shifting the cost from one pocket to the next, because that budget hit that it comes from healthcare in any country is huge. And that is why in the States it's a big presidential debate, and that is why in this country there is these clusters and privatization, because it's huge to the budget of a country, and it takes a big chunk out of that budget. So you need to look at it from that perspective. So I hope that answers your first question. Your second question is autonomy always a good thing? No, autonomy is a great thing when it is given to people who are capable and accountable, and it's a very bad thing if it is granted to somebody who's not accountable or not capable. Same with physicians. We talked last time about when you finish your residency and you write your board exam and you're handed that certificate, and at that moment you feel autonomous. What does that mean? It means you're ready. But if you give a scalpel to a resident and you say, go ahead, be autonomous, then you're going to have really bad results. You're going to have really bad complications because they're not necessarily at that level yet. Whereas autonomy is gained with time, is gained with experience, is gained with knowledge, it's gained with accountability. So I hope that answers your second question. Then there's a question in the chat, is they clustered according to what? Honestly, I don't know. But what I do know is that they decided to pull together within the MOH a medical city from one side, and then a couple of secondary hospitals from another, and maybe based on geographic location, north, south, east, مثلا in the Riyadh region, say, okay, these 4 or 5 hospitals belong together with the centers that serve that area, and we are able to identify people, residents of that geographic region And those will have access to this cluster. Only those will have access to this cluster based on their geographic location, right? And then a different geographic location is covered by a different cluster. So that's what it was kind of based on. Probably a little bit more complex than that, but ultimately it comes down to that. Okay, so this system, let's look back. Are we good with is everything clear? Is everything clear? All right. So let's
Yes,
look
doctor,
back.
everything is clear.
Let's look back a few decades and let's see how Saudi Arabia has performed. So we talk about life expectancy. It's gone up from 66 years to 73. That's great. When we talk about immunization, almost 100%, almost everybody's immunized. We're talking about not just COVID, but we're talking about the pediatric shots, almost 100%. At some point in towns, it was as low as 27%, right? Mortality rate, significant decrease from 52 per 1,000 to 17. Same with the child mortality for peds under 5, and same with maternal mortality, is more than half. So very good numbers. So the system's done very well. In terms of expenditure, you compare it to the numbers that we looked at previously for the US. The US was spending per capita 8,500. The UK was spending 3,400. Imagine Saudi Arabia was only spending the equivalent of $1,000 per capita. And that's not a bad thing. That was actually a pretty good thing. And yeah, we had to spend a little bit more to develop better, but that expenditure was a good sign at some point, or at least it seems so. So where do you think in this kind of ranking Saudi Arabia would rank? I need some microphones on and some guessing.
Top 50.
Top 50. Okay, that's correct. Let's narrow it down. First, the top 10, top 20, top 30, top 40, top. So between
Let's say
40 and
top
50. Okay, anyone else?
Top 10 maybe.
Top 10,
Top
top 20.
20.
Top 20. Okay. Some people said top 50, some people top so yes, top 26. Better than Canada, better than the USA, based on the WHO report published in 2000. Striking. So now we go out to train in their residency programs and we do better than them in healthcare. But we did say how we're comparing. We did say how we're quantifying based on health, based on the cost. All those are taken into account. But what about in Bloomberg? How well did we do? Better than Canada, USA, or worse?
Better.
Also better, right? Also, we got like a top 16. Oh, number 16. Tamam? Can you hear me? I'm losing.
Yes,
Can everybody
Yes,
hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Yes,
All right.
doctor, we can hear you.
Okay. So what were some of the strength that that came from our to the aid of our system? First of all, was this universality. So there's a national entitlement. Everybody got free healthcare. That helps the ranking. The economy was solid, right? And big, lots of money being poured into the healthcare sector. We have some of the best facilities in the world, some of the most state-of-the-art equipment. At some point, the best professionals were brought to this country and they were aggressively recruited. And for the nationals, Awlad al-Balad, they were sent abroad, had received advanced education, and then they came back and started training the nationals. So all these, that kind of plan worked really well for the healthcare sector for a certain period of time, and continued to work well. Like, at the same time, you have weaknesses. So one of the weaknesses, and this is an issue that we talk about in context. So one of the weaknesses was when you had plenty of cash flow in these hospitals, in the ministry, it just seemed that money was never an issue. So people put a very little effort into really solving problems, like really solving problems in terms of efficiency and in terms of process management. And it was just you threw some money on it to hide it, and it would hide for a week or two or a month or two or a year or two, but then it would come back and haunt you, right? Just like, for example, the average length of stay. So اليوم, I think it's a crisis that we have patients that stay in hospitals for 10 days for procedures where they need to stay in the hospital for 1 day. But that just means there's no understanding at the managerial level of how critical it is to exceed a length of stay of 1 day for such a procedure, and to keep the patient unnecessarily in the hospital, wasting a lot of money for 10 days. Tamam? That is efficiency. We talk about efficiency. طبعا موضوع bureaucracy, I mean, things are changing. Things are changing. Over the last 6 years, I could say that, there was a time where we said, oh, bureaucracy, all these committees, if you wanted to put any problem to death, just form a committee and wait, just disappear and not be solved. لكن صراحة bureaucracy is changing. It's changing a lot to the better. And this was huge. On a cultural level, on people, on a cultural level, from a certain generation or generations, there's always an opposition for change. People are always holding on to the status quo, and it's only as your strongest leaders that you depend on to challenge the status quo and change it. And that is happening today, right? There's something called the scarcity perspective. We as a country used to come from a place of more win-lose. What's in it for me? But now we're moving to a win-win. What's in it for everyone? Lack of accountability continues to be an issue, but improving a lot. What does trumping mean? Anyone? Lack of transparency. This is where kind of you look at any results that have been published about Saudi Arabia in the last 20 or 30 years, and we get a little bit critical. Did somebody play with the data? Are we over-reporting in a sense that we're reporting ourselves better than reality because we want to look good? Are we really that transparent? That becomes a challenge. What's really the priority? To be honest, or to be transparent, or to look good? What does trumping mean? Does anyone know?
Is it like overselling yourself?
Trumping. It's not from Donald Trump. But yes, he oversells himself a lot, and he does a good job at doing that. But no, it's not from Donald Trump. Trumping معناها واسطة. For the non-Arabic speakers, vitamin W, wasta. Trumping means when somebody knows somebody and they're going to get you a job that you don't deserve, but because somebody owes somebody a favor, or because your cousin is a minister or a wakil or somebody with influence. So it's a wasta. So that's a disaster, because you get people into jobs that they don't deserve, and that they have no accountability and they have no talent, and it's a disaster. That has changed a lot in the fabric of this country over the last 10 years, I will tell you. Okay. So the conclusion is, at some point, the wealth of the country was critical to founding a excellent healthcare system on a global level. But now we are in a place where things have to change to maintain that ranking, or to even survive that ranking, because the challenges are getting bigger, the cost is becoming bigger, life is becoming more expensive, the country's budget is being challenged, everything is changing around us. We have to change. Tamam? So I did say that this lecture was written 6 or 7 years ago, and this is what I wrote 6 or 7 years ago. And I didn't go over this, but we started almost 10 minutes after 3, so we have 2 or 3 more minutes to complete the hour. These were my suggestions back then as to what the country needs in order to change its healthcare system. حق الوزير الربيع الأول، حق الفصل التوائم, not توفيق الربيع, right? They need to look at measuring outcome and productivity. In a sense, we needed to bring in a culture of accountability. A lot of the work that's happening at the level of the ministry today and these clusters is performance measurement. They want to make sure that people are performing to their best and that their people are accountable. You don't have people sleeping in the system without accountability. The second is the Ministry of Health takes its active role in monitoring and correcting legislation to drive healthcare reform. Yes, the ministry is now trying to hand over management to these clusters, and eventually the clusters will hand over management to companies that are experts in running hospitals. So the ministry is kind of moving towards reforming healthcare step by step. Privatization of the system through insurance and private investors, definitely a big thing. Big debate over privatization is going to be good, privatization is going to be bad. We can talk about that for a long time, and maybe at some point, if you're interested, we can. But definitely, we're heading in the line of privatization. Number 4, competitive recruitment of foreign and developing national manpower. I'm not sure we're doing that good. We do hand over a lot of money to consulting companies that regurgitate their projects from all over. So a lot of the money goes there, but it continues. What matters continues to be that you recruit real talent and people with real life experience to come and do the job for you, whether it's something very specific within healthcare or leading this transformation. Number 5, investment in primary and preventive care. See a lot of that happening. Integrated healthcare delivery, we also see a lot of that happening. And clusters is a form of integrated healthcare delivery. It means you cover from the primary care all the way to the tertiary or quaternary care. And then a stronger culture for innovation, research, and development. I think we are lagging behind in Saudi Arabia in the healthcare system when it comes to innovation and research. We continue to be lagging behind some of the more advanced countries in the world. So those were just merely suggestions that we had listed back then 7 years ago, but a lot of that is happening right now. A lot of this debate is happening right now. All right, and with that, I conclude. I'll leave a few minutes for any questions. And so if you have any questions, please go ahead, and then we'll be done.
Doctor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is the number of beds a country has an indicator of healthcare strength or healthcare efficiency?
So, okay, I will answer your question differently. If خلينا نقول there's a minimum guarantee or there's a minimum requirement. تمام? Let's say you have a hospital, you have 200 beds. You have a hospital, 200 beds, and your average length of stay is 10 days. Tamam? So you have another mini hospital, has 50 beds, and their average length of stay is 1 day. Which one of those two is serving more patients?
The hospital with the 1 day hospital stay.
The 50-bed hospital is serving more patients than the 200-bed hospital. ليش? Because they're efficient.
Yeah.
Right? Every day they turn over the bed, they have a new patient. So, in 10 days, the other hospital is treating 200 patients. In 1 day, this hospital, so the 50-bed hospital is treating 500 patients in 10 days. So does the number of beds, in your question, does it become an indicator of anything?
Not necessarily, no.
It's not an indicator because when you're inefficient with your beds, then it doesn't really measure up to anything. But it's an indicator for the 50-bed hospital, which is exercising maximum efficiency. It's an indicator as a minimum requirement. You need at least 50 beds. You're very efficient. If you don't have enough beds, you won't be able to treat your population. So in that sense, when you're super efficient, yes, it becomes indicator. But the reality is in most hospitals, they're far from maximizing the utilization. They're far from running the beds efficiently because there's a culture of adi, length of stay, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. The doctors, the nurses, the social workers, they don't see that indicator necessarily as an important indicator for the performance of the hospital, for the performance of the system, for the efficiency of the system and the efficiency of the healthcare system in general. Tamam? So it only becomes an indicator when you're very efficient because it's a minimum requirement.
So it's not used to
one day.
access to healthcare, basically.
Yes?
it's not used to indicate access to healthcare?
If you're running things very efficiently, yani, okay, when you come about planning the requirements for a region, and you decide, when a minister looks at the region, he looks at the population in general, and then he looks at numbers indicating the types of diseases, and he looks at the numbers of people who are admitted for surgery, and then that gives you an indication of how many beds you need, given that the system is running whether efficiently or inefficiently. So if a minister doesn't think much of efficiency, and he says that's fine, we'll just open hundreds of thousands of hospitals with hundreds of thousands of beds, and we don't care. The patient can stay in for like 20 days, as far as I care. لكن الواقع is, إنه when the calculations are done, we say, okay, there's an average length of stay per hospital bed of 3 days for this kind of hospital that takes care of some cancer patients, some secondary patients, and some neurology patients. Our average length of stay is between 2 and 3 days. وبناء عليه, our population is such and such thousand, which means on a given day we need to have 300 active beds. There you go. Then we're going to build a hospital with 300 beds, maybe 400 if the population is in rapid growth to meet the needs that we're going to be facing 2 or 3 years ahead of today. You get it?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thank you, Doctor.
Tamam. All right. Any other questions before the weekend? Type. Good stuff. With that, I think we'll wrap up and see if okay. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekends, and we'll see you next week. Is Dr. Omar here?
Yes, Dr. Ahmed, do you allow us to start the quiz?
Yes, please go ahead. Good
Okay,
luck.
so thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. So dear students, please stay on the call. I'm going to share on the chat the password of the quiz, and I'm also the student, your representative is going to circulate the password in a minute. Please log in into the quiz, solve the questions, pay attention to the timer, and make sure that you finish in the allocated time. So you have the password quiz. It's in the chat now. Hiba, I sent you the password quiz as well. You may circulate it to everyone.
All right, I will do so.
Okay. For those that could not access the quiz due to student affairs issues or any other issues or obstacles, you may contact me via email after the lecture, but not now.
Assalamu alaikum, doctor. It shows that the quiz is closed from last Thursday.
Yes, I'm having the same issue.
I think we all have the same problem, doctor.
Okay, just give me a second. Has anyone accessed the quiz?
No, not that I know of.
Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, so I typed my email on the chat if you have any issue. Let me just check why you can't access the quiz. Just give me a second.
Improving quality of care.
Is it still not accessible?
Yes.
Hello,
it's
can you
still
hear
Yes,
me?
not
doctor.
We still can't access it.
Can you please try now?
Nope.
Okay, I called the IT and I think they fixed the issue. Can you try now for the last time, please?
Oh yeah, it works. It says attempt quiz now.
Okay, great. Make sure you solve the questions. And if you have any technical issue, just email me and we can try or we'll see how we can sort it out. By technical issue, I mean any registration matter or any student affairs. Okay? Okay, so if the quiz is working, you may be excused now. You can leave the call. Just make sure you solve the quiz as it stands for your attendance and for your class performance. Thank you, everyone, and see you inshallah next week.